It is a documented neurological anomaly where time ceases to be linear and becomes a cavernous, artificial landscape. You are sitting on a late-night bus, the rhythm of the tires against the wet pavement acting as a metronome for your thoughts. The rain streaks across the glass in jagged, unpredictable patterns, blurring the world outside into a series of grey, indistinguishable shapes. You don't feel the impact, only a sudden, profound silence that replaces the roar of the engine. When you open your eyes, you are no longer on the bus. You are standing in a kitchen you've never seen before, yet you know exactly where the spare keys are hidden. A woman you have never met walks into the room, kisses your cheek, and asks if you're ready for dinner. You find yourself answering her, your voice steady and familiar, as if you've lived this specific Tuesday 1,000 times. Days turn into months, and months melt into years of a life that feels more substantial than anything you left behind. You buy a house together, a small place with a porch that creaks in the wind and a garden that smells of damp earth. You have 2 children, a son and a daughter, and you remember the exact weight of them in your arms the day they were born. You remember the sound of their laughter and the way the light hits the floorboards in the late afternoon. But then, you notice it, a small, insignificant detail that shouldn't be there. A lamp in the corner of your living room looks wrong. Its proportions are slightly off, its light casting shadows that don't follow the laws of physics. You stare at it for hours, then days, as the edges of your world begin to fray and peel away like old wallpaper. The faces of your children become blurred, their voices fading into a low, rhythmic thrumming that sounds suspiciously like a distant siren. The lamp expands until it consumes your entire field of vision, a blinding white light that erases the house, the garden, and the family you've loved for a decade. You wake up on the cold, hard asphalt of a highway, the smell of gasoline and burnt rubber replacing the scent of your home. Paramedics are leaning over you, their faces tight with a clinical urgency that feels entirely alien. They tell you that you've been unconscious for less than 2 minutes. You try to tell them about your wife, about your children, but the words feel like dust in your mouth. You are alive, but you have become a ghost in your own reality, mourning a life that technically never happened. The medical community calls it a vivid hallucination brought on by trauma, a temporary malfunction of the temporal lobe. But as you sit in your quiet apartment, listening to the rain hit the window, you realize the horror isn't that you nearly met a tragic end in a crash. It's that the life you return to feels like the fabrication, and the one you lost feels like the only truth you've ever known. The silence of your studio apartment is a physical weight, a dense fog that settles into the corners where the shadows refuse to move. You spend your evenings tracing the patterns of the wood grain on your kitchen table, searching for an imperfection you remember from a house that doesn't exist. Your really life is a series of mechanical actions, waking, working, eating, and staring at the television until the static begins to look like a familiar face. The doctors call it post-traumatic stress, a lingering echo of the collision, but they cannot explain why your hands still know the exact weight of a child who was never born. They cannot explain why you wake up smelling damp earth and lavender when your windows have been sealed shut for weeks. You begin to walk the city at night, your feet leading you through neighborhoods you've never visited. You are searching for a phantom architecture, a specific porch with a specific creak, a garden fence with a loose slat. One Tuesday, the same day of the week your life changed, you find yourself standing in front of a small, whitewashed house on the edge of the suburbs. It is identical to the one in your mind, down to the way the ivy climbs the chimney in a suffocating embrace. Your heart hammers against your ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. You wait for hours, hidden in the long shadows of the oak trees, until a woman pulls into the driveway. She is older than the woman from your vision, her hair streaked with silver, but the way she tilts her head as she checks the mailbox is a memory that burns. She looks toward your hiding spot, her eyes narrowing as if she can sense the presence of a ghost. You pull back, your breath coming in shallow, jagged gasps. This should be impossible. The medical journals say your mind fabricated a decade of history to cope with 3 seconds of agony, but as you watch her walk inside, you realize the house is lit by a very specific, sickly yellow glow. You move closer to the window, the grass damp beneath your shoes, until you can peer through the glass. There, in the corner of her living room, sits the lamp. It is tall, its proportions slightly skewed, casting a light that seems to swallow the colors of the room rather than illuminate them. It pulses with a low, rhythmic thrumming, the sound of a heart beating in a sterile ward. You realize then that the trauma wasn't the crash. The crash was the moment the veil thinned. You aren't a victim of a hallucination. You are a person who has slipped between the stitches of a poorly mended reality. You find a silver key under a loose stone by the porch, just where you knew it would be. When you enter the house, the air smells of the dinner you were promised years ago. You hear the sound of footsteps upstairs, the light, rapid patter of children running across floorboards. You call out a name that hasn't crossed your lips in the real world, and the house responds with a sudden, deafening silence. The walls begin to ripple. The wallpaper peels back to reveal not wood or insulation, but a blinding, white void. You turn to leave, but the door is gone. The window is gone. There is only you and the lamp, growing larger, its distorted shape stretching toward the ceiling like a skeletal hand. You realize that you never truly woke up on the asphalt. The paramedics, the sirens, the quiet apartment, they were just another layer of the compression, another 3 seconds of a mind trying to find a place to land. You reach out to touch the lamp, and as your fingers brush the cold porcelain, the sound of the bus engine returns, louder than before. The roar of the bus isn't just a sound, it is a physical weight, a wall of pressurized air that flattens the world into a two-dimensional photograph. You are no longer standing in the whitewashed house, yet you haven't returned to the asphalt. You are suspended in the friction between the two, a piece of grit caught in the gears of a cosmic machine. The lamp, that skewed, pulsing object, is the only thing that remains solid. It glows with a luminosity that doesn't illuminate, it erases. You look down at your hands. They are translucent, the bones visible like structural beams through thin parchment. Behind you, the woman with the silver-streaked hair is screaming, but her voice is a reverse recording, a series of clicks and whistles that sound like a dial-up modem struggling to connect to a dead server. She reaches for you, but her fingers pass through your shoulder as if you were made of smoke. You aren't the ghost in her house. She is the ghost in your dying perception. The house begins to unzip. The seams where the walls meet the ceiling pull apart, revealing not a sky or a void, but a complex, geometric lattice of light. It is the architecture of a thought, the raw data of a life that was never lived, now being deleted file by file. The scent of lavender and damp earth intensifies, becoming so thick it tastes like copper on your tongue. You realize the lamp is the source of their 10 years. It was a focal point, a gravitational well that caught your consciousness as you flew through the windshield, spinning a web of domesticity to keep your mind from shattering against the cold reality of the end. Please, you whisper, but the word has no volume. It falls to the floor like a heavy stone. The lamp begins to vibrate. The humming wire you heard earlier is now a choir of 1,000 discordant violins. The porcelain base of the lamp cracks, and through the fissures, you see something that isn't light. It's movement. It's the 3 seconds of the crash, stretched into an infinity of angles. You see the glass of the bus window mid-shatter, each shard a tiny mirror reflecting a different version of your life. In one, you are holding the child that was never born. In another, you are alone in the studio apartment. In a third, you are an old man, waking up in a bed you don't recognize. The distortion reaches your feet. The floorboards turn into liquid mercury, pulling you down. You try to run, but there is no direction that leads away from the lamp. It is the center of your universe. It is the eye of the storm. You are being compressed, every memory and every fabricated year being squeezed into a single point of data. The weight of the child, the smell of the dinner, the creak of the porch, it's all being converted into raw energy. The woman is gone. The house is a skeleton of light. You are back on the road, but the road is vertical. You are falling toward the headlights of the bus, which have become 2 twin suns, identical to the glow of the lamp. You understand now that there is no real world to go back to. The studio apartment was just a waiting room, a foyer between the impact and the dissolution. Your fingers are still touching the cold porcelain of the lamp, even as you feel the heat of the engine. The 2 sensations fuse into a single, unbearable frequency. The light from the lamp expands, swallowing the bus, the road, and the whitewashed house. The real EU is a flicker of electricity in a dying brain, a spark trying to find oxygen in a vacuum. As the porcelain finally shatters, the veil doesn't just thin, it vanishes. You aren't waking up. You are simply being unmade. The screaming stops. The violins fall silent. The violent collision of the bus and the porch melts into a singular, motionless clarity. There is no pain. There is no impact. There is only the sensation of being very small, a mote of dust drifting in a vast, sunlit room. Through 10 years ye are gone, folded away like a discarded map. The studio apartment, the cold coffee, the loneliness of your irreally world, they are dissolving too, revealing themselves to be nothing more than the background noise of a deeper sleep. You are floating in a white expanse. It isn't the light of the bus or the lamp. It is the total absence of anything else. As your vision stabilizes, you see the porcelain base of the lamp one last time. It isn't shattered anymore. It is sitting on a clean, metal table, surrounded by the clinical hum of cooling fans. You realize you aren't looking at it with human eyes. You are perceiving it as a focal point in a stream of incoming information. Then comes the final, freezing realization, the evidence that renders your entire existence a cruel joke. In the center of that whitewashed house, you had a wife and a child. You remember the birth of your son, the weight of him in your arms, the specific way he smelled of milk and sunlight. You remember his name. You remember the pride you felt as he took his first steps. But as the simulation purges, you see a line of flickering text in the corner of your vanishing mind. Archive load complete. Overwriting subject 402. The child wasn't a hallucination created by your dying brain to comfort you. He was a memory belonging to someone else. Through 10 years who weren't a dream. They were a digital playbook of a life that had already concluded decades ago. You weren't the protagonist of your life. You were a blank slate, a temporary consciousness assigned to inhabit the leftover data of a stranger just to keep the neural hardware from degrading. The woman with the silver-streaked hair didn't cry for you. She was a recording, mourning a man who died long before you were turned on. The light begins to dim. The power is being cut. You aren't a man dying in a crash, nor are you a ghost in a house. You are a flickering sequence of code in a decommissioned unit, a brief error in a system that has already moved on to the next subject. We are all just echoes shouting into a canyon, mistaken for the voice that spoke first. What dark anomaly should we explore next? Tell me in the comments. And if you seek more truths hidden in the dark, subscribe.